We will be starting soon. Hey everybody. Well, hopefully this works out well. I hope you are all doing well. I'm trying something brand new today. I think we're going to call this Josh Peck Live because it's me and we're live, and what else are you going to call it? Says the man with zero creativity. Hope you're doing well. I'm trying this brand new thing. I'm streaming on a whole bunch of different channels and things like that. So I do have a chat window open. Hopefully you're all in the chat. It looks like somehow we're actually banned on our main Daily Renegade YouTube channel, but it seems like we've been able to kind of work around it and live stream through this on that channel, I believe. If you're on that channel and watching it, there's two YouTube channels this is broadcasting to right now. Daily Renegade 2.0, which I believe is youtube.com/JPD Weekly. And then if this is broadcasting correctly, then our main YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Josh Peck Disclosure DR. That's the main Daily Renegade channel. Which we've been banned from for a while, but through this Restream app, maybe we found a way to get around that. We'll see how it goes. I see a lot of people in the chat already. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. I'm hoping to be able to do these types of live streams almost on a daily basis if possible, because with all of the coronavirus stuff, with all of the pandemic quarantine stuff, it's become harder for all of us to have fellowship, right, as Christians, especially with what we're going to talk about today, how there are pastors that are being arrested here in America just for holding church service. And so we definitely got to talk about that. And also, you know, how are Christians supposed to react when bad things happen? Why do bad things happen to people all across the board, whether they're good or bad, whether they're Christian or unbelieving? how are we supposed to react to that? And I actually have an article from dailyrenegade.com that I want to go over with you guys, because it's from one of our amazing writers, and she adds some really interesting perspective that I think we can all benefit from. So first, I want to say hi to everybody in the chat, and if we have time, and we probably we'll do a Q&A. We'll do a Q&A near the end, and so that way, if you have any questions, you can ask me, and I'll answer them in the chat. Looks like we are live on Facebook, which is great. Not sure if we are on Twitter. If you're viewing this on Twitter, please give me a shout out. Let me know. And it looks like we're live on a couple of YouTube channels, so hopefully that's going to work out okay. I've also started some new streaming services for this type of thing. So we're on DLive, Twitch, LinkedIn, which I didn't even know that was a website anymore, and Dailymotion. Not sure how many of those we're actually broadcasting to right now. Still trying to figure all this out, so we'll see how it goes. All right, Karen is saying hi. Hi, Karen. WLD is saying that they're watching this on DR, on Daily Renegade. That is great. And the Wolf King is saying, not going to lie, it's kind of scary. Never experienced anything like this before, and I went through Hurricane Katrina. Yeah, what we're dealing with right now is completely unprecedented. I've never went through anything like this in my lifetime. I'm 35 years old, and this is definitely new for me. It's new for a lot of us. So we have a lot to go through and a lot to talk about, and really just want to be able to have a way to fellowship. Now, ideally, what I'd like to do is just start live streaming from the Daily Renegade website, dailyrenegade.com. And at some point, we will figure that out, and we'll transition to that. What I'd love to do is live stream from there and all the social media outlets at the same time. So, yeah, again, like I said, this is brand new. This is the very first episode, I guess you would call it. This is the first broadcast of Josh Peck Live, and I am glad to be speaking with all of you. So, with that being said, Let's get into it. The first thing that I want to look at here, this comes from dailywire.com. This comes from Matt Walsh. And if you're not familiar with Daily Wire or Matt Walsh, you should check out a show. It's just called The Matt Walsh Show. It's on the Daily Wire YouTube channel, or just go to dailywire.com. But I really like his show. He kind of holds some contrarian positions, and I like that. I like being challenged, and I like trying to think about why do I really believe what I believe. I think that's good for all of us to do. Iron sharpens iron, that kind of stuff. But he wrote this piece about how pastors are being arrested for holding worship services, and this is not health and safety. This is tyranny. He did a show on it today, so if you want to check that out, you can. But he wrote that this week, and I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but this is happening all under the guise of just being healthy and safety. But look how authoritarian the country has gotten in such a short amount of time. It really proves that for one thing, a lot of people are just willing to go with this. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people willing to basically just do what they're told, do what the government says. And I think the reason is because a lot of people don't know their rights. The Constitution, the Bill of Rights, it's not really taught as much in schools or universities anymore. And when it does, it's almost taught with a sense of disdain. There's this sense of disdain for our founding fathers from the millennial and younger generations. So it's totally weird, but because people don't know their rights, they don't know that what the government is doing right now is unconstitutional in terms of saying that churches could be closed down permanently if they break this call for social distancing, for not holding church services. And this has kind of got me thinking, because while I understand the need for social distancing. I'm in quarantine myself. As far as I know, I don't have coronavirus or anything like that. But we just found out, Christina and I just found out that our school where we've been, where Christina, my wife Christina, for those who aren't familiar, where Christina has been picking up school supplies, like because we've been having to homeschool because the school basically closed down. So they've been giving like work assignments and stuff, and she goes and picks them up. We just found out tonight that one of the ladies that was passing out the school supplies has tested positive for coronavirus. So the chances are pretty low that Christina caught it through that and then brought it home. Chances are pretty low, but still, just to be on the safe side, we're all quarantined now, so it's good to just be safe. But yeah, there's as far as I know, there's no cause for concern for us. But so while I understand that there's a need to be safe, and you don't want to infect anybody, you don't want to get infected, you don't want to risk people's lives, but at the same time, there's a line where it goes too far when the government is telling churches to close down. There are things that people have sacrificed their lives for. There are things that people have fought for and died to protect these rights. One of them being, free speech, freedom to practice your religion. And now we're being told by certain local governments that we're not allowed to anymore. And that's a big issue. So I'm kind of caught, I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of caught in between this back and forth of thinking, well, we have to defend ourselves. We have to get out there, defend ourselves, go to church. And if somebody tries to arrest you, defend yourself. We have to fight for our rights. And then on the other hand, there's this other side of it. Well, we do have to, we don't want to infect anybody else. We should do the social distancing thing and, maybe live stream church if you can and that kind of stuff. So it's difficult to really know where the balance is between those two things. It's difficult to know kind of how to parse that, and that's what I want to talk about today. And because of what just happened, what we're talking about, pastors getting arrested now, because of what just happened, I am now more on the side of, look, we absolutely have these rights. People who have come and gone long before we were ever born. People have died to protect these rights. We need to defend them, and we really need to show. I'm leaning more towards the side of, like, we need to show the government that this is not going to happen in America. This tyrannical kind of stuff that the people will fight back against that. Meaning going to church, And if going to church isn't even really that big of like a fighting back, defending your right, but that might be all it takes. I don't know, but let's look at. Let's look at what is going on. Also, keep me posted in the chat and let me know if you're having trouble viewing the stream. If the stream is breaking up or if there's a lot of problems, let me know, because, again, this is all brand new. Maybe I can change some settings and fix that if that's happening. Somebody has said it's been buffering for about 5 minutes. All right, well. We'll see if it picks up, and then maybe there's some settings that I can change or do something. But for those who are able to view, let's roll with it. If you're having trouble viewing, try maybe hitting pause and letting it buffer for a while, and then hit play. It's not going to be exactly live doing that, but you might at least be able to see it. Also, if you are having trouble, let me know. Well, actually, this tells me, so never mind. The people who are, there are other people on YouTube saying the video is working perfect. So if you are having trouble on YouTube, you can go to my Facebook page and try viewing it there. And I believe it's broadcasting on Twitter. I believe so. I'm not sure, but there's two YouTube channels that you can try, but my Facebook would probably be the easiest to find. Just search for me on Facebook. But again, I don't know if Facebook will let you chat, so that's the only thing. Brand new to this, so ever since YouTube started putting, like, you have to have encoders and things now to use their live streams. So, somebody else is saying there's a lot of on and off spinning, that it's buffering a lot. Other people are saying it's good. Okay, good. Somebody is watching this on Twitter and says that it's streaming fine. Okay, good. So it might be some of you watching might not have very good internet connections. It might be clogged in your area because there's a ton of people online. So it could be that. It could just be congested. So all right, let's roll with it and just see where it gets us. So continuing on with the story again from DailyWire.com. It says this week, and this is just unimaginable to me that this would happen here in America, especially so soon. I mean, if somebody would have told me, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, that this was going to happen this fast, I wouldn't have believed it. I would have thought that would just be sensational, but it's actually happening. This week, a pastor was arrested and charged with criminal offenses, multiple offenses, for holding a worship service. Let us note that this event occurred not in North Korea or Saudi Arabia, but in the United States of America. Pastor Rodney Howard Brown of Revival International Ministries turned himself into authorities after leading his congregation in Sunday worship, which put him in a violation of his county's stay-at-home order. There are more and more counties who have these like little authoritarian dictatorships in their local government. And I mean, there are some counties that are telling people that they cannot leave their house unless it's just to go to the store, and then it's up to the local government to decide if their travel is essential or not. So there are people that are getting in trouble just for jogging around the block. It's getting ridiculous, but it says Hillsborough County in Florida, like many other states and localities across the country, has forcibly shut down all establishments that it has deemed non-essential. And again, the writer here is Matt Walsh, speaking in the first person. So he says, as far as I know, no government at any level, anywhere in the nation, has deigned to label churches essential. Our founding fathers, who gave the right to assemble and the right to practice religion, pride of place in the Bill of Rights, seemed to have disagreed. But in these times, we are not subject to the opinions of the founding fathers or even the legal document they wrote. We have entered a point in our history where governors, mayors, and local county boards can come up with any rule they like, outlaw whatever behavior they don't like, and enforce their edicts at gunpoint. But to question this new system, I have been repeatedly informed, is to wish death on our nation's elderly population. So there's a couple of things before we get to rest. There's a couple of things I want to comment on. So first is, like I mentioned before, I think a big reason this is happening is because people don't know what their rights are, and a lot of people have gotten too comfortable. I mean, think about it. I mean, in my generation, we haven't really had to fight for anything. I mean, we've had some wars and things in the Middle East, and we've had 9/11, and there's a lot of stuff like that. But just for the normal, just average person at home, not involved in the military, just the normal average person, let's say 35, 40 years old or younger. We haven't really had to fight for a whole lot. This is kind of our first real battle with something like this from our own government, I should say. And so it's really strange because in light of this, you see how willing a lot of people, especially young people today, are to just listen to everything the government says and does. I remember when I was in high school, middle school and high school, to be like an anarchist was kind of like the edgy, cool thing. And, there were a lot of kids that claimed to be anarchists. And there was just this it was the trendy thing to be really distrustful of the government. And it seems like that's flipped. It seems like now in the younger generations, the trendy thing is to be in compliance with the government as long as it's Democrats in office. And I think that probably occurred in that switch occurred in the Obama years. But now we have a situation now where you have a media that's totally biased. The media isn't going to report on this, which is why I'm thankful we're able to live stream, because I'll be honest about my biases. I'm Christian, I'm conservative, so anything you hear from me is going to be filtered through those lenses. But you have a mainstream media that is totally biased, and they're not honest about it, and they side against whatever this current administration does. But because of that, they've actively lied to the American people about details that we need to know about this virus, about this pandemic. So we have young people today, and really just a lot of people in the country really haven't had they haven't been faced with a situation like we're in right now, where it's looking like we're going to have to fight back against our government in some ways, social protests, things like that. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but when you have local governments that's telling their citizens that they can't go to church, I mean, that's directly against the Constitution, no matter what the reason is. I mean, it's up to the individual to decide if they want to risk their own lives or not in order to go to their place of worship. And so it's an interesting time, and I don't know how it's going to play out exactly, but I think I think this type of thing, You have people like myself who say, absolutely not. Just go to church. Don't let the government push you around, even if it means that you get arrested. I mean, look, if it's one thing Christians should be used to, it's getting arrested and being persecuted. Look at our history. Look at the founding of the Christian church. Look at how all of this started. Everybody got arrested and killed, and I mean, it's horrific, and it shouldn't be that way. But that's the world we live in. But most of us haven't been faced with that. We haven't been faced with that. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to have to get really used to the idea that we will have to stand up against our governments, against our local and federal governments, to be a Christian, to participate, to have the rights that are laid out in the Bill of Rights, and to uphold the Constitution. I mean, Christians all over the world are experiencing this, and have been for a long time, but to a much greater degree, like in the Middle East and in China and stuff. I mean, you get killed for being a Christian there. At least as of now, we haven't had too much of that here in America, at least not from our governments, but it might get to that point. Because imagine this situation with this pastor. What if he decided he wasn't going to leave? What if he decided, I'm going to hold church service? What would happen? Well, the police, I would assume, might draw their weapons or attack the person and put him in cuffs to haul him out. Well, what happens then? I imagine a lot of those people at the church were probably armed. So you don't, I mean, that could have sparked a shootout. I'm not saying that should happen. There is an element here of live by the sword, die by the sword, and that might not always be the appropriate reaction, but again, I don't know, because we're in such strange territory. You look at the persecuted Christians in the first century, and it didn't really seem like they, fought back with weapons and stuff a whole lot. But those were also different times. That was the founding of the church. That was when it was so important that the church get started in this message of Christ. Go out to all the nations. It's important now too, but at the time this was something brand new. And when somebody dies for their faith, when there's a martyr, word gets around. That's a powerful, powerful message. So I don't know if that changes today just because Christianity is more widespread and a lot of people in this country at least claim to be Christian, whether they are or not, who knows. But I don't know if that necessarily changes. All I know is that there are a lot of churches out there who will, especially in the South, who will have no problem defending themselves with force if they feel persecuted by their local government. So this story could have played out a lot differently, and I don't know what that means for us. The second point I want to make is we've already had a lot of civil unrest in this country, especially the past 4 years. There have been a lot of civil unrest. This isn't going to help. This situation, this authoritarianism isn't going to help because it divides the country. It divides the country again from people who trust the government and want to do everything the government says. I mean, they basically worship these people who are in power. And even to the point that they hate their fellow countrymen for not agreeing. You have those people against people like me who are very suspicious of government officials, even if they're elected, even if it's people that I voted for. We still, I believe we still have to maintain a healthy amount of skepticism, of suspicion even, because it's very easy for these human beings, they're all human beings, anyone we elect is a human being, a fallen creature in biblical terms, in Christian thought. And because of that, they're all susceptible to greed, power, all that kind of stuff. No one's exempt from that. So it's easy for people in power to fall into authoritarianism. It's easier for them to fall into it than it is for them to resist it. Well, you have those two factions of people in the country. This is going to cause even more civil unrest because there are local governments now that are setting up hotlines telling people, if you see people gathering, call and tell us so we can go arrest them, so we can go break it up. So we can go make them stop. I mean, it's turning the country, half the country at least, because I think half of the people wouldn't do that, but half of the country into tattletales. And so it's getting to the point where now not only can we not trust our governments, but we can't even trust our own fellow Americans. So it's causing even more civil unrest. And that's the type of thing that if you follow this show, or if you follow things that I've talked about before, I've said if there is going to be a second civil war, it's not going to be like a North versus South kind of thing. It would be more something like this. It would be civil unrest that erupts because of some kind of panic, like what's going on now, some kind of disaster that divides the country because we don't share an ideology anymore. If you're going to have an operating country, if you're going to have a country, you need to have a shared set of values. That's supposed to be the Constitution, for America. It's supposed to be, but it's not anymore. Again, the Constitution has been taught in universities with this sense of disdain for our founding fathers. And so because of that, you have roughly half of the country that is, that knows their rights, they're pro-Constitution, pro-America, and then you have the other half that's more like anti-America, or they're anti the America that was founded the way it was. They want to create a new America. And that type of thing could cause so much civil unrest that it just erupts in parts of the country, and then it essentially is kind of like a second civil war. So the second civil war, I mean, it may have already started, and this kind of thing might be a byproduct of it. So we have to think about that, because not only if we are in that type of battle, not only is it a physical battle, but we all know we're engaged in a spiritual war as well. If you're Christian, and if you're not, I'm glad that you're watching. Thank you for watching, and stick with us because we're here for you. But if you are a Christian, then you probably already know this, at least to some extent. But we're actively engaged in a spiritual war. These aren't two separate wars, by the way. It's all one war. It's all one battle. But it's mainly spiritual. It's spiritual that's bleeding into the physical. So you could think of like your human enemies, people you might disagree with, or people that might even want harm to befall you. You can think of them as prisoners of war with extreme Stockholm syndrome. Ephesians 6 tells us that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, and then it lists out who our true enemy really is. And it's spiritual powers of darkness. So it's a spiritual enemy. People that follow spiritual darkness, they're being deceived, or they're being blinded. That's why we need to pray for them and minister to them as best as we can. Now, when it comes time to protect your family, we have to be ready to do that too, and that obviously is a very physical thing, but it still has a spiritual foundation to all of this. And I think that can help us with some perspective, understanding what this war really is that we're engaged in. So this isn't just the local government against the church. It is that, but it's not only that. That's not the foundation. The foundation is there is a spiritual enemy that is trying to ruin the church, and we happen to live in a country that has been the freest country known to man and ever in existence. So I mean, obviously, Satan would have his sights set on destroying that. So when it comes time for a disaster, such as 9/11, which did bring in a lot of authoritarianism, I mean, we've got TSA and stuff now, and nobody really fought back against that too much. And we got used to it, and that's the other thing we have to keep in mind. It's easy for people to get used to this stuff. But when there's a disaster, now it's a global disaster. Now it's a global pandemic, coronavirus, and no matter if it's manufactured or if it's what wherever you stand on like the origins and how much truth we're really being told about it, that the main point I'm making, we can have those conversations, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still spiritual powers of darkness using this to their benefit to try to destroy what we have in this country, which is the freedom to practice Christianity. And it's alarming, but the most alarming part of it is just how fast this has happened. Just how fast we went from the freest country in the world to now local authorities arresting pastors for holding church service. I mean, what is it going to be in another week? What's it going to be in another 2 weeks? What are we really looking at? I can't imagine it getting any better unless. But again, I'm not trying to tell anybody to do anything, but I think the only way, we have to remind the government, we have to remind our local authorities that they work for us. We elected them. We pay taxes. They work for us. They don't get to pull this authoritarian stuff because we have a constitution. We have a Bill of Rights in this country. So we need to remind them of that because, again, it's easy for human beings to fall into the trap of being power-hungry, greedy, and all of that stuff and end up being totalitarians. So we have to be the ones to do that. Now, what that looks like, I don't know. Is it something as simple as writing a letter, or is it something as extreme as, God knows what? I don't know, and that's the question I've had ever since I learned about this story. Is where's the line? I mean, I think we've passed the line a long time ago. I mean, the second that we started having restrictions of our freedom in the way that it went about, I think that crossed the line. Now, again, I'm not saying that everybody should, be reckless and go in stadiums and all congregate and spread the virus around. I'm not saying that, but what should have happened in the freest country in the world is the government should have suggested that we practice social distancing and not try to enforce it, because I think enough people in this country are smart enough that they would have said, hey, that's probably a good idea. We should do that. So what it does, because of the policing, it shows that there is a major distrust from the government towards the citizens. The government doesn't trust us. So they are taking, it's not only trust, though. They actually don't care for us. Because if they cared for us, they would try to build that trust. They would, if it was only a trust issue, then they would say, all right, let's give you a chance. Let's see what you guys do. Please practice social distancing. We're not going to police it. But what's interesting is they trust the criminals, the actual criminals, more than they trust the law-abiding citizens like you and me. I saw this one mayor, I think it was in Texas maybe, went on TV and actually politely asked criminals to just hold off on the crime until the coronavirus pandemic is dealt with. To just please chill out. Hold off on the crime for now. Like, it's so backwards. I can't even, for one thing, what kind of mayor is going to think that's going to work? What is that going to do? Like, the criminal's going to sit there and say, yeah, okay, well, we'll cut the mayor a break. He's dealing with a lot. We'll go loot Walmart in a couple of months when all this is over. I mean, it's ridiculous, but I think what it really shows is that the local authorities, they're not asking you and me to not go to church. They're enforcing that. But when it comes to criminals, they're just asking them to not commit crimes. So what does that tell you? Everything's backwards. Criminals are shown more respect than Christians in this country now. And it's just snowballing and getting worse and worse and worse. Let's continue on with some more of this story, because it's just crazy where this is heading. Pastor Howard Brown insists that his church took many precautions. So see, here you have somebody, you have a pastor, you have a church that was trying to comply with the government's suggestions. And this is what's so mind-blowing about it, but it still wasn't enough for the government because he still got arrested. So the government isn't interested in trying to work with the citizens. They're interested in gaining as much power as they can, and once the government has that power, they never give it up. So we can't let them have it. But so he took many precautions. Hand sanitizer was given out. The staff wore gloves. Congregants were spaced out as much as possible. They may not have all been 6 feet apart, but they were certainly better spaced than you will be if you wait in line at a grocery store. As it happens, you can go to the grocery store 10 times a day and load your cart up with snacks, candy, and soda. You can then stand in a crowd of densely packed people as you wait to purchase your items from a cashier who may or may not be wearing gloves. All of this, says our dear leaders, is both safe and essential. But sitting in a church a few feet from the next person, taking care to cover your mouth when you cough and making sure that your hands are washed is both unsafe and inessential. Does that make any real sense? Probably not. Can the government simply declare all churches non-essential? Close them indefinitely and thus circumvent the First Amendment with so much ease to render it effectively nullified from here on out? I doubt that was ever what the men who wrote it had in mind, but here we are. Exactly, and here we are because we're allowing it. Now, I'm not saying you and me personally. We're engaged in a discussion about it right now. I'm doing videos, you're participating in the chat, you're watching this video, and hopefully you're sharing it around and trying to get other people informed. So, but just generally, this is being allowed. We're allowing this to happen. And we as a country should never do that. I mean, think about it. It's like allowing your disobedient child to continue and then expect him not to get worse. Expect him to get better on his own. It's not going to work. When your child does something wrong or steps out of line, you need to take care of that as his parent. Well, we as the citizens, we need to remember these aren't our leaders. Like, leaders is a terrible word for these people. These are our servants. They serve us. We elected them to do a job. We hired them. They're our employee, essentially. They don't get to turn around and try to switch it and impose all this force on us. So but that's not being taught to people anymore. That's not taught in schools. That's not taught in universities. That's not taught anymore. So a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people in this country think that we're very similar to other countries where you have somebody at the top, you have a king or you have a ruler at the top, and then everybody else are the subjects, and we have to do what the king says. That's not our country. Never has been. We have it flipped. Our officials is probably the better word. Our officials are elected. We're the ones that put them in that place to do a job. And if they don't do it, they run the risk of not getting reelected. They lose the risk, or they run the risk of losing that position because we would vote them out. At least that's how it should be. But again, they've done a great job at tricking the country into thinking that we actually have to listen to this stuff. We don't. And will that mean if we don't comply with their demands, will that mean that there will be arrests? Absolutely. There will be arrests, but there needs to be arrests. This is kind of a simplified way of saying it, but essentially that old saying, they can't arrest us all, they can't kill us all. We need to start taking that seriously because it's true. If we all actually as a unified country just stood up against this, it wouldn't happen. The government would back down. They would have no choice. And if you don't believe me, just look at how easy it is for government officials to back down when they have just the smallest bit of social pressure against them. One bad word against them in the media, they can't stand it and they back down. How many apology videos? I mean, you see this in celebrities and you see this in major corporations and minor companies. I mean, you see this everywhere. How many apology tours have there been, in the past, say, 10 years or so? I mean, you can't even count them all. And it's only from a very small amount of social pressure. And these people cave. So the thing with our officials, our so-called leaders, the thing is, they, by and large, they don't have a backbone. You just look at them generally, and I'm not thinking of any one in particular. I'm just in general, they don't have a backbone, and they will cave to social pressure. But if we just lay low and just let them get away with this, they're going to keep taking power, and they're going to keep citing this disaster. They're going to cite this pandemic as an excuse to take more power later. That's what they're doing right now with 9/11. There are media people in the media actually defending this. They're saying, well, the government had to get involved with 9/11. We had to have TSA. We need them to keep us safe. Are you saying that we shouldn't have TSA? And I am saying that we should not have TSA. The airlines themselves should take care of their own security. And if an airline has terrible security, then no one will fly their airline and they'll go out of business. Problem solved. But that type of position is seen as like totally crazy and conspiratorial in our day today. So people are using the last disaster, the last major one, 9/11, where we allowed the government to take power and control with our travel with the TSA, and it's not just that the TSA is annoying. I mean, there's an actual power. There's like a control there where they can determine who gets to fly and who doesn't. They can detain you, just for suspicion, even if you don't have any reason to be suspected of anything. They can still do that. So we gave them a lot of power. Did we ever get it back? No. And now that example, 9/11, is being cited as an excuse or as a reason why we need to give the government more power now. If we do, we will never get it back. We won't ever get it back. A lot of our freedom has already been infringed on. It's been infringed on enough, more than enough. So we can't just keep letting it happen. But I fear that, unfortunately, I think that is what's going to happen. Which is really sad to say, and I want to be more optimistic about it, because I know, like it would not take many of us. Again, these people cave, and it doesn't take many. I mean, there are people on the left that can round up 1,000 people on Twitter to tweet at Nike or something, and they'll go on an apology tour and totally rebrand themselves, by the way, just with 1,000 people, and they will lose customers. I mean, they have lost so much business because of that ridiculous decision. But they don't care, because the only thing they care more about money is power. And they feel that they're losing power when they get a bunch of people just tweeting at them. That's because these people are spineless. They're weak, and we're letting them walk all over us. It would not take many of us to ensure that the government doesn't do this kind of stuff, that the government backs off and says, well, okay, we can't do that, because too many people are going to revolt against it. So we can't do that. And it's sad, because it would not take many, but I'm afraid that I'm worried that we won't see it. So I'm hoping that we do. I'm praying we do. Join me in prayer about that. We need to keep our country in prayer, because we are on just a razor's edge right now, where the country could go in one of two ways. If we stand up for our rights, if enough people in this country, and it doesn't take many, a couple thousand, I think, would do it. If we get enough people, if enough people in this country actually stand up if we stand up for our rights in a way that really shows them, look, this you just can't do this, then the country could get back on course. The country could actually start to prosper again. Maybe we could see a reversal of getting some of our rights back. Maybe we could start actually going after things like the TSA and stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, there would be no end. There would be no limit to what could be done. So that's one side. The other side, is full on authoritarianism, full on we are now a totalitarian country. And that, I think that's where it's leaning, and that's horrifying, and it's really sad, because there never has been, nor I think ever will be until Jesus returns, a better, more free, more safe country than the United States, and we need to protect that. If nobody's going to do it for us, we need to do that. So continuing on with the story. Now, this part really gets me. And keep in mind that we as Christians, we as conservatives, we're called science deniers. All right, let's keep that in mind as we read on. Meanwhile, many states have officially labeled abortion clinics essential and allowed them to continue killing humans during a shutdown that is supposed to prevent humans from being killed. States that have tried to put the abortion business in the non-essential camp have been overruled by federal judges. As it stands right now, you have no right to go to church or worship in communion with your fellow believers. You do still have a right to kill your child. Never mind the fact that abortionists are probably not able to maintain social distance when they perform the execution. Exactly right. How could they? How would that even be possible? That practical point, just like the constitutional and moral point, is irrelevant. We are being governed according to the whims of bureaucrats and politicians who themselves do not appear to be answerable to any higher earthly authority. This is necessary to keep us safe, we are told, and we believe it, many of us, forgetting that all tyranny everywhere and through all time has been justified on similar grounds. Absolutely correct. And the reason that I brought up the science denial thing, these are the ones that are saying that the unborn child in the womb is a parasite, that it's not really human. If it's not human, what else is it? It has human DNA that's significantly different. It's different from the mother's DNA. The women in this movement will say, we have a right to do whatever we want with our body. I agree. The baby is not your body. The baby, the child in the womb, has different DNA. It's a different body, and it's in a different developmental stage, but it's still human. I mean, there's, and I know I don't want to make this an abortion video, because we have those, and I want to dedicate full episodes to that. We will talk about that, but there's just a lot of reasons why it's so hypocritical that they label us science deniers when they push this kind of stuff. But imagine that. Abortions are considered in this country as essential, but church service is non-essential. That is how far this has gotten, because not enough people stood up. Not enough people stood up against this stuff. Too many people were too worried about being nice or being non-confrontational, or they were too worried about what their friends thought of them. Again, if we had, when Roe v. Wade happened, if we had an entire country that stood up against this stuff, it wouldn't have happened. The social pressure would have knocked it down. The left is really good at using social pressure to get their stuff passed. And unfortunately, by and large, on our side of the aisle, we're really good at complying, or we're really good at complaining in silence, which is the same as compliance. Complaining in silence, that's compliance. We comply with this stuff. We complain about it in secret, but we don't really stand up against it. A few do, which is good to see, but it's not enough. It's not enough. And it's gone so far now that so many people in the country are used to it, they don't understand what the big deal is. So it's really interesting to see that. It's really horrifying to see that. Interesting probably isn't the right word. But abortions are deemed essential. Church service is not. Do you think God's not going to have something to say about that? Just think about the overwhelming amount of murder that is legal in this country. I mean, is there any concept of a holy and just God? Is there any concept of a God like that, where he doesn't have anything to say about this and just lets it go? I mean, this country is going to reap its rewards. This country is going to reap what it has sown. And the only thing that can stave that off is us Christians standing up against this and trying to make a change. And that's the other thing, too, and I don't want to diminish this. God will work with us. I mean, he's on our side here. We're on his side. we have the same goals in mind. We don't want to see babies killed. We don't want to see freedom infringed on. Just think of the David and Goliath stuff. Think about all the times a very small amount of people, with the help of God, changed the world. All of the amazing battles that were won all throughout the Bible, both physical and spiritual, against seemingly impossible odds. Yet God was there, meaning it's impossible for the enemy to win. The only way the enemy wins is if the enemy convinces us to lay down our arms, convinces us to comply, where it convinces us to put ourselves in a place where God can't use us, where God won't use us. And then we, too, will have to reap what we've sown. We will have to reap the horrors that are coming our way because we didn't do anything to defend against it. We didn't do anything to stop it. We allowed the enemy into our ranks. And I fear that that's where we're headed. So if there's ever a time to start standing up against this stuff and to, not only, I mean, we got to pray, we have to fast, we got to do all that stuff. We have to fellowship together. We got to do like what we're doing tonight. We got to talk about this stuff. But if there's ever a time to actually take an active approach against this stuff, now is the time, because again, we are on that razor's edge and it's leaning towards tyranny. Continuing on with the last bit of this, and then we'll talk about something else. But he says, I am trying to imagine a definition of religious liberty that includes the government closing churches indefinitely on the basis that they are not essential enough to remain open. I cannot think of one that would be at all cogent or meaningful. Indeed, it has become obvious, if it wasn't already, that our mainstream notions of liberty and rights and freedom are largely nonsensical, as evidenced by the people who normally assert these concepts as absolutes, but now insist that the government has the unquestioned power to lock us in our homes and shut our businesses for as long as it pleases. Most of us, it turns out, do not have a governing philosophy or set of principles. We are slaves to our emotions. It's a very important line, and there is a lot of that. So if the government scares us enough, we will rip the "give me liberty" or "give me death" and "don't tread on me" bumper stickers off of our cars and stuff them in the closet while we cower alongside it. Then when the threat is past, or at least we are told that it has passed, we will proudly affix the bumper stickers back on our bumpers again and sing bravely about our love of freedom. And that's the thing. It's really easy to do that kind of stuff when things are good. There's that popular quote about, if you give up your rights, if you give up your liberty for safety, you'll lose both and you don't deserve either. I'm probably butchering that quote, but it's easy to say that stuff when things are good, but to actually put it in practice when things get bad like they are now, you don't see a whole lot of it. You see a lot of, again, that compliance when the government is actively taking our rights away. And you know what we're doing? We are teaching the government that they can do this to us. We are teaching the government what kind of America this is now, what kind of American people we are now, what kind of Christians we are now. We're teaching the government that we are weak, and we will follow their lead wherever it takes us. And I'm not saying you and me as individuals. I'm just saying just as a nation of supposed Christians. We are teaching the government that they can do this. I mean, this whole thing is a test. Whether coronavirus, whether it's real, manufactured, whatever, it doesn't matter. This whole thing is a test. This whole thing is a social test. The government is using this to see what they can get away with. And we are teaching the government that they can get away with a lot. They can have total control over the country and citizens, and we're not going to put up that much of a fuss about it. And that's really sad that it's gotten this far. Now, I will say, as far as if this was manufactured or not, it definitely was on the spiritual side. Again, those are our true enemies. I'm sure the spiritual darkness, the powers of spiritual darkness, have had this in mind for a long time. They knew exactly what they were doing. Either that, or they were waiting around for a disaster to happen, and they knew exactly how they would handle it. And because many Christians are ignorant of the fact that there is a devil, there's a very high percentage of people calling themselves Christian that they don't believe in demons or the devil, or they don't believe in that kind of evil. They think of evil as more of a philosophical idea, because they're ignorant of the fact there is a spiritual darkness invading our camps here. They're working for the enemy and they don't know it. Again, they're prisoners of war with Stockholm Syndrome. They're prisoners of war that they don't know exists, and they have Stockholm Syndrome towards those spiritual powers that are enslaving them. That's why it's up to us to take the gospel seriously, go out, make disciples of all nations. We need to show love, minister to these people. Even on the human side, if we feel like we hate them, we cannot fall prey to that. That is not the way. That is not the way. We are commanded. Jesus commands us to love and pray for our enemies even when they persecute us. So it doesn't matter who your neighbor down the street voted for, and if you disagree with it, it doesn't matter. We are commanded to still go out, pray for these people, show them love like they've never seen before, because think about who's controlling them. Powers of darkness are enslaving them, and you think that they've ever seen love? They don't know what love is. They've never experienced it. So imagine how peaceful and how really addicting true love would be to somebody who's never experienced it before. How wonderful that would be to them. It would be very easy to present the gospel to people like this. All it does is it takes us to have a little bit of humility. It takes us to not act like the world and not get in these people's faces and shout them down when they say something we don't agree with. It takes us setting aside our flesh and allowing the Spirit to lead. That's what it takes, and that's what we should have been doing all along. And if we as the church would have been doing that all along, it wouldn't have got to this point. I'm not saying coronavirus wouldn't have happened. It likely still would have happened. But it wouldn't have gotten to this point where the government is using this. Local and federal governments are using this against Christians, specifically Christians. So we need to step up. And like I said before, no one's going to do it for you. We need to step up. And that is probably going to mean that we're going to have to do it on an individual basis, and then we will see who we're fighting alongside. Because if you decide as an individual you're going to stand up against this stuff and do what you have to do, if you will stand while everyone is sitting, it'll be easy to see who is standing with you. That's how you'll know. And that's when we can actually start forming something here that we should have had a long time ago. We should have formed a long time ago, an actual true Christian fellowship. And that's what we've been trying. That type of thing is what we try to do with Daily Renegade. But we need more. It's even that, it's a good start, but it's not sufficient. It's not going to get us out of this mess. It's a good start. But, we need to be doing more actively in our own individual lives. So, it's got to be a group effort, but the group is made of individuals. So, we'll, at least for that, I want to talk about some other stuff before this live stream ends. I want to talk about some good stuff too. I don't want this to be all doom and gloom, but I am hoping to motivate people who are watching to get involved in this. And if that means marching down to your mayor's office, knocking on the door and demanding that this kind of stuff doesn't happen, then do it. We're probably going to have to start showing up in person face to face. Don't just tweet at people, like show up. But ultimately, again, what it comes down to is Jesus Christ. He is our commander. If you're a Christian, if you're a believer, he's our commander. If you're not a Christian, I would say look into it at least. I mean, now is the time. It's not just this life that you're going to live. I mean, there is an afterlife. You might not believe there is, but what if you're wrong and you didn't prepare for it? That could be an eternal disaster. I mean, you don't want to take a chance on that. So, I would say, get your heart right with Jesus, get right with Jesus, join the family. But I do want to talk about some more kind of, sort of more uplifting stuff than just all this bad stuff. I'm glad we are talking about this because we do need to talk about it. But we can have some joy too. And part of that, the joy stuff, we might ask, where is God when bad stuff happens? And I want to talk about that. Before that, though, I want to take a short break for people who are in the chat and say, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat now. And let's take a couple questions from viewers, because I would love to do that. Those are actually my favorite part of the show is, taking questions. In the meantime, while people are getting their questions in, if you haven't had a chance to already, make sure you visit dailyrenegade.com. Now, don't worry, we are not going into a paid section for this. This live stream is all free, all for you guys. We're not moving into paid section or anything like that. But if you do want to be a member, we do have a lot of content that we can't show on social media because they've deleted it so many times. We've had to we've had to do our own thing. So dailyrenegade.com, you can get a membership. It is only $10 a month or $100 $100 a year. Geez, I can't talk. 10 a month, 100 a year, whichever one you prefer. I suggest doing the 100 a year because you get 2 months for free, which is great. And you only got to do it once, and you don't have to think about it for a whole year, which is pretty amazing. But at Daily Renegade, we have a lot of other stuff for you, too. If you're a chronic pain sufferer like I am, Kratom might help. I used to be really addicted to opioids. I was really, I was prescribed by a doctor. I was hopelessly addicted to oxycodone. It was really bad. I almost died. But I have a rare degenerative bone disease, very painful. But since finding Kratom, I haven't had to. I'm not on anything anymore. I haven't taken a pill. I don't even take Tylenol. I haven't had like an actual pill in. I can't even remember. It's been a long time. I take Kratom now. It works out great. Well, someone in the chat. We'll get to it. I just want to remember that. If I forget, somebody in the chat remind me. Somebody's saying I've never paid for the word, meaning, why is there a paid membership? I'm not going to pay for the gospel. Yeah, that's a straw man, and if you want, we can deal with that. But and this is also the same person who's saying I avoid saying geez or OMG at all costs. All right, well, anyway, Kratom. Sorry, I was reading the chat. Kratom helps out a lot with my chronic pain. I think it could help you too, even if you're just dealing with some arthritis or chronic back pain. Any kind of pain it's great for. Coastline Kratom is awesome. I highly recommend picking some up, and do it now while you still can, because people are buying this stuff like crazy, and it stores beautifully. It's easy to store. I have Kratom that I've been using for years. I've had stored for years, and it still works great. So you can store this for a long time. The FDA is looking to shut Kratom sales down completely. The DEA has been planning this for a long time. It likely will happen. And there's a good example. The AKA, the American Kratom Association, the DEA tried to shut down Kratom, all sales, tried to ban Kratom completely a few years ago. The AKA orchestrated one march in Washington, D.C. There just of a couple thousand people, I think. And that's all it took. And the DEA caved. Kratom is still allowed. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to show people, look, we're not going to let you get away with this. So anyway, they are looking to ban it, so get some now while you can. Get a lot, because we don't know, and just even with the coronavirus stuff, who knows when they're going to be sold out of it. CBD is another good thing. I take this, I sleep great. It cuts down on my pain a lot too. When I found when I take CBD, I don't have to take as much Kratom, and that's great. So all of this stuff. There's also something that we can't talk about. I'll show you briefly, and okay. We actually got we got a lot of videos deleted because of that particular product for some reason, which is a good cleaning agent. Instead of using cancer-causing chemicals that you keep in your sink right above where you drink your water, you can use that. But you can go to dailyrenegade.com, and at the very top banner you can find all of that stuff. All right, so if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in. Someone's telling me to ignore that other guy, which I'm inclined to. I'll just say quickly, nobody here is selling the gospel. You just got a big, heavy dose of the gospel for completely for free. And we have plenty of free stuff at Daily Renegade. No one is selling the gospel. You have never heard from me or any of the other 15 hosts. Well, if you want to know how to get right with Jesus, I'm going to need your credit card number. It's a ridiculous straw man, and it comes from people who don't do enough research to know what they're talking about. So I'll just say that no one's selling the gospel. That is ridiculous. And I'll say too. I'll just add this in here. You say that you've never paid money for the word. You've never had to pay for the word. Did you buy your Bible? Yeah. All right. So I'll leave that there. We have some real questions from people. So somebody is asking. This one I don't know. If you put your mask in the microwave for a minute, will that sterilize it? I have no idea. I wouldn't try it. But the type of mask that you want to get, I believe it's called N95. That's like the type of grade that you want in a mask. Otherwise, it doesn't work for this pandemic. Why is closed churches and open liquor stores? Why not an attack on the church? Well, that's what I'm saying. It is an attack on the church. So closed churches but open liquor stores. Wait a minute. Oh, maybe I'm misreading the question. Why are open liquor stores not an attack on the church if closed churches are? Okay, I understand your question. Okay, closed churches because that is directly targeting Christians. Open liquor stores, people... We live in a country of freedom, and they can make choices even if they're wrong. So I would never say somebody should go and get drunk or something. But that's why it's not somebody buying liquor at a liquor store is not an attack on the church. That is our responsibility to talk to that person, share the gospel with them, and try to if they are an alcoholic, try to get them out of that addiction. And that's why I was talking earlier about like ministering to people like this. So an open liquor store, that's somebody who's holding a business, and in this country they're allowed to do so. But we also, as Christians, we should also be allowed to go and talk to people about Christ and talk to people about the harmful effects of alcohol and things like that. We should be allowed to. So the reason that it's why closed churches are an attack on the church is because that's directly targeting Christians. When somebody goes and gets a bottle of liquor, they're not, most likely, they're not doing it like, oh, this will get those Christians. It's not like they didn't have any interest in drinking, but they're doing it just to attack Christians with it. So that's the difference. Mayor Weiss is asking, I've been away for a while. Josh, how is Nathan? Nathan's doing well, thank you. And I appreciate all your everybody's prayer and support through everything with Nathan. He's still in remission, which is great, but we still have a lot, and this is just the worst time for this type of thing to happen with coronavirus. We have had a lot of costs because of Nathan's cancer treatment. He's 6 years old now, by the way. He just turned 6 not that long ago, so happy birthday, Nathan. But he's doing really well. If people care to donate, dailyrenegade.com/donate, the donate page, all of that goes to Nathan. So if people want to, but thank you for asking. His spirits are good. He's doing very well. I'm gonna scroll and see if there's any more questions here. Hey Josh, what's up with these pastors who got arrested? Is asking Republic not a democracy. That's what this whole episode was about. So if you joined in after we talked about that, you can back up the video. But yeah, some pastors are getting arrested because they're breaking local government's I guess what they're calling local governments are telling churches that they have to close down because of coronavirus, and some pastors are having church anyway, and so they're getting arrested for it. And I mean, it's just a totally totalitarian move on the local government, and we as Christians need to stand up against that. If we want to go to church, the government has no business telling us that we can't. Okay, let's see. How do you believe, this comes from VPower07, is asking, Josh, how do you believe this will play out in terms of biometric tagging and tracking? That is a great question. I recently did an actual episode of Into the Multiverse, believe it or not. I know it's been a long time since I've been able to do Into the Multiverse for Skywatch TV, but I just recently did one. It'll air in a couple of weeks on that very question. My basic premise is there are people like Bill Gates who are pushing to use this crisis as an excuse to start using biometric tagging and tracking. Now they'll always go the humanitarian excuse. They'll always say it's so we know who's sick, it's so we know who's infected. It's for their protection as much as it is everybody else's. But how will it be abused? That's the question. How will this be abused? Obviously, it's going to be used to persecute Christians because Christians are the ones that keep congregating. Christians are the one that keep wanting to go to church and spreading the virus, and so we need to track them. And they're going to force us underground. So, I want to be optimistic with it and say that scenario will not play out because enough Christians will stand up against it, or enough people in America will stand up against it, but I don't know if that's the case. So if it's allowed to happen, it's going to get bad and it'll happen real fast. So now is the time to prepare for that. Whatever that looks like for you and your family, you know your family best. But now is the time to prepare for that. I do not believe that is a conspiratorial, sensational topic anymore. That is absolutely something we as Christians need to address and need to get used to talking about. And thankfully, a lot of you already are because you watch my show. So you're already very used to this. Okay, let's see. Let's see if we got any more questions before we get to the next story on, where is God when bad things happen? We got people saying they use CBD and stuff. That's awesome. I'm glad that it's helping. Yeah. Let's see. How is Nathan? Already got to that one. All right. A lot of people saying thank you. Amen. 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 Looking for a question. Did you have an IV in your arm? Oh, yeah, I had a blood test today. Yeah, thank you for actually asking. I actually forgot to even bring that up. Thank you, A Big Red G. Did you have an IV in your arm? Yeah, I had a blood test today. It wasn't coronavirus related. I've been having some stomach issues, and I just wanted to make sure. I haven't had like a checkup of anything in like way too long, like years and years and years. But I've been having just nothing serious, just some stomach issues that made me think maybe just to be on the safe side I should go in and get checked out. So they wanted to run a blood test. They ran a blood test. Already got the results back. Everything is great. Everything's perfect. All of my counts look amazing, which is. Frankly, it's surprising, but like kidney function, liver function, all that stuff is great. So they're gonna do a couple other imaging tests just to make sure everything's running smoothly as it should. And I wish I wouldn't have described it that way, but as far as I know, everything is a-okay. But yeah, so that's what that's all about. Just a routine blood test. But everything came back great, so praise God for that. All right. Karen is saying, I have a question. What's the question? Oh, here it is. I want to know if you think that this is a dry run for something that's going to come later just to test us. Yes, and see how we would react. Yes, it is. Now, whether it's human beings, whether it's human agents doing it, or if it's just on the spiritual side, I don't know. Because it could be that this was like an orchestrated thing from human beings, but I'm not as convinced about that because I just... you need a lot of cooperation, in order to pull something like that off, and you need a lot of adequacy that I don't think the government really has. But what I do think is, this was orchestrated by spiritual agents of darkness. When they're pulling the strings, they're deceiving human beings, and they're using certain human beings in power as like puppets on strings, and having them without their knowledge, but having them call out do these things. So yeah, I do think it was a dry run. I think the enemy, and when I say the enemy, I mean Satan, demons, fallen angels. But I think the enemy is testing us to see what they can get away with, what will stand against, what we'll do if we're going to allow God to help us or not, or if we're just going to lay down and take it. I do believe that it was orchestrated from the enemy for sure. We're praying for you and your family. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Let's see. Let's see. How's your health doing? As far as I know, everything is good. Thank you for asking. As far as I know, my health is great. Let's see. Just looking through if we don't have any. They say close down churches. What about mosques? Interesting question. So when Mayor de Blasio gave a public briefing on this, he specifically said in his statement, churches and synagogues. He did not say mosques. Now, I don't know if mosques are included in the actual plan, if they're going to shut mosques down too, but it was interesting that he didn't say mosque. He only said churches and synagogues. Isn't that interesting? Just the Christians and the Jews, I suppose. But, we'll see. I mean, it doesn't matter as much what people say. What really matters is what they do. So we'll see. What's interesting is it would be the Christians that would say that, even the Muslims, while we disagree with everything they believe in, they still have a right in this country to worship, and that's another thing where we would say it's up to, but we should be allowed to go and witness to them. They can worship how they want, but we should be allowed to go and talk to them and witness to them without having to fear violence. To go and witness to them and tell them about Jesus Christ, and we should be allowed to do that too. Some folks are saying it's difficult to get big amounts of money out of their bank account. Do they have to wait days? I don't know. I don't have any information on that. That is something outside of my knowledge. So maybe somebody in the chat can answer that one. Katie is saying, you and your family were on my mind the other day, Josh. I'm glad you're doing good. We'll keep you lifted in prayer. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Let's see. Somebody else is saying it's a test. I believe it is. Are we in a war and they're doing battle with this virus? We're in a spiritual war for sure. Now, whether they caused the virus, who knows? They could have just been waiting around for something to happen. I'm sure they at least made it worse than it would have been without their intervention. But it is interesting because a lot of times when it says pestilence, when it talks about disease in the Bible, it talks about pestilence. If you look into the ancient Hebrew, it's actually a proper name many times, and it's an ancient fallen deity. It's an ancient false god. It's an ancient god that surrounding nations around Israel would venerate. So they were like gods of pestilence. So a lot of times when it says pestilence, it's actually talking about the so-called the little g god. And if you want more information on that, it's very, very interesting. If you want more information on that, check out Derek Gilbert. He's written a lot about that, and he talks about it on his show at Skywatch TV. So check that out. Okay, I think we're about ready to get to the next thing that I wanted to talk about. Okay. All right. Blues Girl 65 saying, "Oh, come on, Josh." Don't know what that's in reference to, but we'll do another. If you have more questions, hold them till the end. We'll do another Q&A after this next thing that I want to talk about, because I want to talk about like hope too. I don't want to just do doom and gloom stuff, because that's not really what we should be focused on. We should prepare for that. We should be aware of it for sure. Be aware and prepare. But our real focus should be on the hope of Jesus Christ. We should have peace and security in Jesus, knowing that whatever this world throws at us, we're safe. We're in God's hands. Even if we die, we are safe. So we need to keep that as our focus. But with a lot of people, it's kind of difficult because inevitably the question comes up: where is God in all of this? Where is God when bad things happen? And one of our amazing writers addressed this very question, and I wanted to go through now. The articles at dailyrenegade.com are only for members, but I'm going to give you I'm just going to give you this one so you can see. So it's sort of like a subscription, like it's like a magazine or online magazine subscription. You get lots of articles as well with your membership. But for those of you who haven't actually seen the website, we're going to have an app soon too. Very soon. We are developing it now. We're going to have an app for your phone, and I believe it's for the TV too. If it's not, you'll be able to cast it from the phone while we look into a TV app. But I believe it's for the TV too. But we're going to have a phone app so you can watch all your favorite Daily Renegade shows right on the app, and so it'll make it really really easy for you. But dailyrenegade.com, if you haven't had a chance to check out kind of what we look like, what we do, what we're all about, I'm going to show you quickly the homepage. If it's going to load here. There we go. It's because I'm live streaming right now, but we just recently did something on Pizzagate being reopened, and that you got to watch that. If you watch anything, you should watch that. But look at all these shows. Like, we have plenty of shows for men and women. We have shows that are hosted by women as well as men. So I mean, we really got something for everybody here. But yeah, this is our website. We have merchandise too. Lots of cool stuff. But one of the things that we do, here's that top bar, by the way, of if you want to load up on some of this stuff, it's a good idea to load up on this. But one of the things we do is articles. So I have this article open. It's from one of our writers, Terry Dirks, an amazing writer, and she has a really interesting perspective on all this kind of stuff, which I think can help. And her story is really heartbreaking, but it's encouraging as well that somebody who goes through something like this can come out of it and still have hope and know that God is there. And while we're on the topic, there's something else that I want to read after that. And one second. I wrote something a while ago having to do more from not as much from a personal place, but from like a biblical place. Knowing that God is right there with you all of the time. How can we know that, and what does that really look like? And I wrote something that I think is just as relevant today as it was the day I wrote it, that I would like to read after, if I can find it, after we go through Terry Dirks' thing here. But, like I said, I'm sure if you're a Christian, you've had this question before. You have gone through times. That's actually something that kind of binds all of us together. We've all had times where we've wondered, where is God in this? I'm not seeing the article on this. I'll have to search for it, but I don't want to leave you guys hanging. So let's get to it. Where is God when bad things happen? Again, you're getting a Daily Renegade exclusive look at some of the articles, some of the content that we provide to our members. So this comes, again, from Terry Dirks. Many years ago when my SIDS baby died, after weeks of isolating in my grief, someone took me to visit another SIDS mother. She looked so pulled together. Her hair and makeup were done. I hadn't done mine in weeks. She talked about the self-esteem class she was enjoying, the employment opportunities she was considering. She even talked about trying for another baby. At that moment, my emotions grabbed onto her for dear life, because she had survived the exact same hell that I was now going through, and she had come out of it She had come out the other side with optimism that life was still worth living. And if that could happen to her, then maybe it could happen to me too. I hung on to every word she said. And that's a big reason why fellowship is so important. And it is important for us to be transparent with each other about this kind of stuff. And there's a level of trust. That's why I get really bent out of shape when Christians bash other Christians, because all it does is break trust. All it does is that's now one less person that can be useful in real situations like this. Looking back years later, it occurred to me that connections like ours happen all the time. And all of life's losses and disappointments, we all feel best understood by the person who knows exactly how we're feeling because they've been where we are. If in that circumstance, the one who is understanding and comforting is a believer who wants to share his faith in the God of all comfort, then the Holy Spirit has a wide open door for the sufferer's heart, which might not happen any other way. And that's also a very powerful witnessing tool. Everybody has gone through heartache. Everybody has gone through just unspeakable hurt. And when you can identify with somebody like that and connect with somebody through that pain, that is powerful. And that builds trust like almost nothing else can. Does that mean that God needs our pain to draw others to himself? No, God doesn't need anything, but he can use our pain if we're willing to put ourselves at his disposal and be sensitive to such opportunities. Just how does God feel about our pain? So we have Psalms 147:3. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 56:8. You number and record my wandering. Put tears into your bottle. Are they not in your book? Revelation 21:4, God will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be anguish, nor pain anymore. Hebrews 2:18, for because he has suffered in being tempted, he is able to run to the cry of those who are being tempted and tested and tried. And boy, are we in a time of tempting and testing and trying right now. But because he has suffered in being tempted, he is able to run to the cry of us who are going through that as well. 2 Corinthians 1:44, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of sympathy and the God of every comfort, who comforts us in every trouble, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any kind of trouble or distress with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. So it says God sympathizes with our pain. He was never the source of our pain. That was Lucifer from the beginning of time when Lucifer's rebellion failed. God's new creation, mankind, enjoyed living in a beautiful garden on that same planet that Lucifer had ruled. Mankind had a love relationship with God, something the angels had never had, and a plan of redemption for sin, also something the angels never had. We don't really know what the relationship between angels and God was, but it's clearly there's something different. There's something unique about humanity, God's relationship with humanity. Ever since Lucifer and his dark followers have hated us, they have been trashing God's people and his planet because jealousy is a powerful motivator for hate. He had read the back of the book. He knows his ultimate doom, but it only makes him angrier and more determined. God was very definite about not risking having Adam and Eve eat from the tree of life and then living in their fallen state for eternity with the plan of salvation not yet accomplished. He got them hustled out of their fast, not to punish them, but to protect them. He had bigger plans in mind for them and for us. The gradual painful deterioration of our bodies and minds as we age is the progress of our souls towards death and towards the much better life that God is preparing for us. And that's the proper way to look at it, because there's a temptation to look at time as a curse. And some people have nihilistically kind of taken on this idea that time is a curse, but it's not. Time is a gift. It gives us, in a sense, it gives us time to make that decision to be reconciled with God. You know, and I wonder if that is the main difference between us and the angels. If the angels live in eternity, and if eternity is a state outside of time, when they rebel, and again, I don't understand how that works, because that's a progression of events, which would seem to indicate time, but maybe not. maybe it's different. But when they rebel, then that decision is made. It's done. There's no redemption because there's no time to be redeemed anymore. And then maybe that's why they're fallen here on earth where there is time. But there is no redemption. So time is a gift. We're given that as a gift. And we can be reconciled with God. We can choose to be reconciled to God through Jesus Christ, and then we can spend our lives building on that relationship and getting to know him, and then spending the rest of the time that we have left on earth going and introducing other people to Christ, so other people can have that chance, so other people can be redeemed as well. That's the thing that all human beings have in common. That's what we all have in common, is that we're fallen. Without Jesus, we wouldn't be able to be reconciled with God at all. We would be detached from our Creator, detached from our Father. But through Jesus' sacrifice, through that shed blood on the cross, there is a path to redemption, and we have the time to do it. I did find that second article, by the way, that we'll talk about. But so, time's not a curse, time's a gift, and we need to keep that in mind. Even times of trouble, times of pain, tribulation, things like that, there's still time, there's still opportunity to witness to people and increase the number of people who will end up in heaven with their Creator, with our Creator. And so that's important. That's important to keep in mind. Continuing on. Pain in this life is inevitable because the beautiful world God created for us is now contaminated and broken by sin. It's not the way he intended it to be. He has a plan to fix it, but not until the fullness of time. Ephesians 1:10. Mankind complains that God should step in and fix all the brokenness now, and that his allowing evil to continue only proves that he doesn't care. God cares very much, but he will not violate his own character. He will not end time until the last believer comes safely into his fold. From God's perspective, it really hasn't been all that long, because one day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as one day. Yes, again, it's eternal. He's in a state outside of time. He's in time too, but he's outside of time. It's like you can build a house and live in it, but you can also go outside. Kind of the same idea. Sometimes God does step in to rescue believers from pain. Miraculous healings absolutely do happen, not as often as we would like. Since we never know how or why the miracle happens, we don't know what we could do to encourage miracles to happen, and we get hung up on goofy doctrines when we try. The perfect balance of that God wants to develop in our lives is gratitude for miracles that come, but also gratitude for his faithfulness to us in the sufferings we endure, and faithfulness to share our joys and sorrows with unbelievers who need to hear that this God thing really does work in our lives. Pain and disability are an unintended consequence of our fallen state, never something God intended for us, and never a punishment for sin. But then how concerned is God about exactly how each individual sufferer chooses to manage his individual pain? We know that pain intensity and pain tolerance vary widely from person to person. We know that analgesic effectiveness and severity of side effects also vary. Doesn't it make sense then to leave each individual to decide for himself what works best for his pain and how much long-term risk he is comfortable tolerating? Pain management should never become a moral issue to be decided by those who have never experienced chronic pain. And yeah, that's a good point. As a chronic pain sufferer myself, now I will say that we as believers, we of course should express our opinions, but we should never put ourselves in a position where we act like we know what the other is going through without going through it ourselves. So that's important to know. So while I say, I am off of opioids, like I don't take any prescription drugs anymore, and to a certain extent, I can't really say that. I can't really say that it's sinful or immoral to do that, because it depends on the circumstance that somebody is in. It depends on are they aware that there are other options? Maybe not. I wasn't for a long time. Are they some junkie kid trying to take it to get high, or are they somebody in serious pain and that's how they manage it? And the only use for that drug in their lives is to manage the pain, and there's a lot of things that I that have to be understood, that have to be asked, that have to be discussed. And a chronic pain sufferer is not always going to be up for discussing those things with you, by the way. More often than not, they're not going to want to talk about it. Or if they do, they're going to want to talk to you, because as a chronic pain sufferer, it's really hard for us to connect with people who aren't chronic pain sufferers, because we have this ongoing thing in our lives that's always there, no matter what. It's always there. And most of the people that are around us haven't experienced it themselves, thank God. Very thankful for that. But because of that, it's just difficult to connect. So sometimes we kind of isolate away from people. I certainly do that. It was only through years of just practice and just kind of getting through it that I've learned to open up more about it and talk about it. But it is difficult, and each individual is different. So like this blanket of chronic pain, it can't really, not everybody who deals with it can be painted with just that broad stroke, because every individual is different. We each have, even if we have the same disease, the same chronic illness, we're still individuals. We handle our pain differently, and we are all too aware that there is no way to express what it's like for us subjectively to somebody, because they can't be in our head. Like, they can't experience it in our body the way that we do. So we're painfully, I'm not trying to do a pun there, it's just literally, we're painfully aware of that fact, and that can be very isolating. So a lot of chronic pain sufferers fall into depression. I certainly did. And that's why I really like this article, because I found hope on the other side. And so there is hope. But that's why it's I believe, to make just a moral statement that, well, narcotics and pain management drugs, it's all pharmakia, it's all sorcery, it's all bad, it's all... No, you can't. It's impossible to label it like that, because real sorcery, real pharmakia, that word that everybody wants to throw around because they know a Greek word or Hebrew or whatever, but whatever it is, believe it's Greek. But there's got to be intention. The intent. If you look into the meaning of the word, the intention is to access the spirit world. People who are taking it for their pain, that's not the intention. They don't have any intent. All they want is for their pain to stop. So you can't label everything as sorcery. But anyway, so continuing on. So she says, drug addiction is a separate issue because it happens when somebody uses analgesics prescribed for pain for an unintended use, getting high, and then realizes they can't stop. The legitimate use deteriorates into the illegitimate use. And the way to prevent that from happening is to respect the possibility and to monitor oneself during the course of legitimate treatment. And yeah, I got addicted to this stuff. I mean, they prescribe it for you. You think it's safe. You think it's just okay to take, and then you get addicted. That's what happened to me. We can blame the easy accessibility of the drugs or the surprise of having rogue manufacturers using additives to increase the risk, but ultimately addiction happens when somebody ingests something they know is inappropriate for them. Educating the public against this practice will require de-glorifying the party drugs. And she's talking about actual like druggies here. She's not talking about, if you're taking something for your pain. Party drugs that keep the dancing energized at raves so they won't be so tempting. It will require more than just grim facts about addiction, but definitely it will require no condemnation for those who have fallen prey. Most importantly, it will require teaching better coping skills for loneliness and rejection and for handling disappointment. Best of all would be an introduction to a loving Savior. For some very tortured souls, the ultimate pain management is suicide. Deeply regrettable, because it means that all their management techniques have failed them. Suicide hurts the families and friends left behind because it leaves guilt and unanswered questions that have never been resolved. And that is something every chronic pain sufferer has thought about too. So if you meet a chronic pain sufferer and if you're thinking on how to talk to them or how to deal with them, you got to keep that in mind. I mean, look, we're not like, you don't have to walk on eggshells around us. Well, I can't speak for everybody, but at least me, I can speak for myself and pretty much every other chronic pain sufferer I know. You don't have to like choose your words carefully, or we're going to be super offended. Like, it's not that. It's just you don't want to be ignorant of what you're talking about. So I mean, you got to know every single one of us has thought about suicide before. So in my earlier years, especially when I was going through depression, that was a constant thought. And it's when you're going through that, it's extremely tempting. Um, and it's never the solution, by the way. I want to make that very clear. If anybody's going through this and they're thinking about that now, that is not the solution. The thing that really scared me out of it was at the time, I did not know if suicide negated my salvation because I was really young. I was a teenager. I didn't know. And that fear was enough why I was just too scared to do it because I didn't know if that meant I was throwing my salvation away. I didn't know. But look, yeah, suicide, if you're dealing with that, there are people that you can talk to. You can talk to people here at Daily Renegade for sure. Us hosts or even the other members. We're actually setting up. You can do that now on the website through comments and stuff. But we're setting up Daily Renegade to be more social, so you can talk, so members can talk to one another more. So we are working on those improvements. But there are people you can talk to. Faithful Counseling. If you look that up online, that's a great service. I use that even today. But you talk to a counselor online. It's just it's excellent. It's Christian based, but it's not like corny and cheesy where you're just gonna get Bible verses thrown at you all day. It's not. That hasn't been my experience at all. It's been very, very helpful. So you might look into that as well. Faithfulcounseling.com. Okay, so there's unanswered question, that can never be resolved. But is suicide the unpardonable sin? Now, the Bible mentions 7 incidents of suicide. They're listed there. And it says that none of these were committed because of intractable pain. The commonality of all of these appears to be honor and not losing face, not appearing weak, loyalty to the king, regret, self-recrimination. The Bible mentions these occurrences, but it says nothing about condemning the act itself. It seems to be silent on the matter, and since our Lord died to pay the price of every sin, then suicide is not the one sin that can't be covered. According to Mark 12 and Mark 3, the unpardonable sin is blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, most particularly attributing the Holy Spirit's miracles to the dark kingdom. Jesus was performing miracles by the power of the Holy Spirit, and the Pharisees credited Beelzebub. That particular kind of blasphemy won't even be possible today because Jesus is no longer on earth performing miracles. Today's big issue is called right to die, and it's about pain and pain management and the right of self-determination. None of us would ever deny the palliative patient a comfortable death, but it isn't about that. This is about someone who isn't palliative, I don't think I'm saying that right, but who deems their life unworthy to be lived and who demands a physician's help to end their life. Sometimes the pain they want to end is mental illness, and the current treatments don't work in their case. Sometimes they have a prognosis of physical disability, and they don't want to live it out. These sufferers would have everyone's sympathy were it not for the demands that a physician helps them, even though it violates the physician oath and personal moral code. Some worry that today's gift can become tomorrow's expectation. If it becomes acceptable to cause the death of those who choose it, will it become acceptable in a society of shrinking resources to cause the death of those who cannot contribute financially and whose maintenance become expensive? Assisted dying is already available in some countries, which fuels the discussion in North America. Canada's discussion was televised for months without reaching a conclusion that could become law. Not all pain is physical, and some say that emotional pain can be worse. If we see a fellow believer stumbling in an area where we ourselves have stumbled, do we expose ourselves and our failings in order to share the counsel of a painful experience? Just one quick thing on the suicide thing. I do believe that would be a sin. It would be murder, because and specifically murdering a Christian if you're a Christian, because you are a Christian. So if you're killing yourself, you're murdering a Christian. So I would put it in that realm of sin if it's. But again, we can't judge every case like that because some people are mentally unable, they don't know what they're doing. So there are things like that to take into consideration as well. But continuing on, does God really expect that level of this is important. Do we expose ourselves and our failings in order to share the counsel of painful experience? Does God really expect that level of transparency from us? Clearly, that is exactly what he expects. That's the point of, like, we're supposed to confess our sins to one another. It's not so the other one can get in a good dig on us. It's so we can all improve together, and it builds trust. That's why, again, like I said before, I really get bent out of shape when Christians bash other Christians because of things that they consider they're doing wrong, or things they don't agree with. It's like, that's so not how the church is supposed to be acting. You're supposed to love that person so much that the only reason you would talk about their sin that they're committing is so they can improve, because you love them. Not because you love yourself and you want to be right and you want to show them how stupid they are. But you see so much of that today. So that is what God expects. The Apostle Paul is very transparent about his past as a murderer for Christians, and about his current frustrations with himself when he doesn't do the good things he's committed to doing, and still catches himself doing the things that he loathes. He lets us listen to him rail against his personal failings. Admitting our own mistakes can be a powerful encouragement to others with human frailties. Once again, God didn't cause this pain, but he can use it to draw others to himself. We might hesitate to share, fearing we don't have the answers, don't know our Bibles well enough, haven't licked our own demons enough to give advice. Except this isn't advice. This is just coming alongside. It's the shared painful experience that will melt the non-believer's heart. When God asks us to plant seeds in prepared soil, he doesn't commit us to do all the watering and fertilizing and pruning ourselves. He has a whole kingdom of qualified gardeners who will each do their part to nurture that seed. What he wants is for us to walk into the opportunity that he presents to plant the seed of shared pain, so that it'll begin growing into the planting of the Lord. So there are good things that can come out of things like that. There are positive things. God works all things together for good for those that love him and are called according to his purposes. That doesn't mean everything will be good. It means that even the bad things, God can work together for good. But we got to cooperate in that effort. And that's part of why we do got to be open with each other. It builds so much trust. It builds so much fellowship and love. There's no limit to that, really. And the church has been missing that for a long time. How I can't speak for everybody, but let me ask you this. How close are you actually, family members included, how close are you with people that you go to church with? Like, would you feel totally comfortable just talking to them about whatever sinful thing you did the night before, or, whatever? I've never been to a church like that. Never. I honestly would be more comfortable telling you guys, broadcasting it live for the world, but telling you guys about anything like that than I would anybody that I've ever went to church with. And it's because that type of thing isn't cultivated in the church much. We're trying to build that here with Daily Renegade. I want all of us to be like that. But that's why I've been open tonight. And I always try to be as open as possible, talking about all the stuff that I've been through, and the various long list of sins I've committed, and my imperfections, and I'm very imperfect, just like the rest of you. And I want us to all be open with each other like that, because it's going to build trust, and that's what the church is supposed to be. And it also teaches us. It teaches us how to be with other people. So if we bring that level of love to a non-believer, like I've said before, love them like they've never been loved before, because chances are they haven't. Most Christians haven't even been loved like that, because just not a lot of Christians operate like that. There's not a lot of the church that really operates like that anymore, which is really unfortunate. So again, no one's going to do it for you, so you got to be the one to do it. But Jesus will lead us in that, because he's the source of all love, right? He's the one that truly loves us, and he died to prove it. He was willing to die to prove it. So he loves us that much, and he's walking through our lives with us and with all that pain and sin. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about tonight before we do one more quick Q&A and then I'm going to bed. But one last thing. God truly does go through our lives with us, with all of our pain. And I think sometimes and again, a big reason why we don't think about it in the terms that I think it's meant to be thought about is because churches don't teach it. If you think about the living God living in you, I mean, he's right there with you, going through your pain. He feels your pain with you. So you're never alone. You're never alone. And I mean, think about how powerful that is. We're gonna show some biblical stuff to really prove this, but think how powerful that is, that the creator of the universe is your father, and your father goes through your life with you, experiences everything with you, all the pain, and so you're not alone. But I want to get into this because and this is the hopeful note to end on. This is what we're going to end on, and it's brief. But I think that this is what we should be telling other Christians. This is how we should be living. We should be living as if we know that this is true. God is with us, and it's not just a platitude. It's not just a cliche. He's literally living in you, with you, experiencing life with you, seeing life through your eyes with you. And so let's get into this. And then we'll do, if anybody has any other questions when we're done here, we'll do another quick Q&A, and then it's to bed because I am exhausted. But I wrote this a while ago, 2014, wow. So yeah, I wrote this 6 years ago, but I do believe that this is just as prevalent today, actually more so today than it was when I first wrote it. But the temple, the spirit, and eternity, God's dwelling in us. So it says, what do we mean when we say the Spirit of God dwells in us? I believe many of us have at least a basic understanding of that concept. I also believe not a single one of us, given the limitations of our human perception, can fully appreciate the full scope of what this means. It truly is a beautiful concept, and one that is unique among all other theologies in the world. We can begin in our understanding with the words of Paul. 1 Corinthians 3:16, know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you. Now, there are two ideas to what this passage is referring to. The first idea says that this is meant to be understood as referencing the entire body of believers. The body of Christ as a whole is the temple, and the Spirit of God dwells in that body. The second idea states that this is referring to the individual Christian. Each one of us acts as a temple of God, and he dwells in everyone individually. Now, I believe both ideas are accurate. I believe God dwells in the church and in the individual Christian. So a support that I have for this comes from Acts. Here's a support for the view in the account of the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. So Acts 2:1-4. And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place, and suddenly there came a sound from heaven as a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them, and they were all filled with the Holy Ghost and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. So we can find examples supporting both ideas in this passage. Verse 1, I'll bring it back up on the screen so you can follow along. Verse 1 is right here, top line there. Verse 1 says, they were all in one place and with one accord. The individuals were gathered together with one common mindset. So this shows how the group was made up of individuals, yet was acting as a single entity. In verse 3, it states that cloven tongues appeared and sat upon each of them. So this demonstrates that they each had an individual experience. And then verse 4, by the singular language used, shows us that the source of this was one Spirit, the Spirit of God. So this passage can be used to show that the Holy Spirit dwells in each believer individually and as a whole. And that's really important to know in going forward, because not only does God go through our experiences with us as individuals, but as a whole too. This is something that binds you and me together. This is something that you and I share in together, as a whole, as a fellowship, as a congregation, as fellow Christians. We all have this, that God loves all of us that much, that he's individually living with us all, and you and I, we can bond on that. And that's important. But let's continue on to really make this point. But so I mainly want to focus on the individual aspect because it's easier to explain the group aspect of it after we know the individual side. And the individual one, that's got to be our foundation. We got to understand that first. And then once we have a grasp on that, then we can recognize, okay, my fellow Christian brothers and sisters have this too. And that creates a bond that is unimaginably infinite and unbreakable. So each and every one of us who has invited him to do so has the Spirit of God dwelling in us. So we are even told exactly where he dwells in the first verse that we looked at. And if we can view ourselves as the temple of God, we can compare that with the temple in the Old Testament. The temple was made of 3 parts: outer court, inner court, and holy of holies. The Holy of Holies was the innermost part of the temple where God would dwell. And we too are made of 3 parts. We have body, soul, and spirit. So if we are God's temple, our spirit would be comparable to the Holy of Holies. So by contrast, our physical bodies would be comparable to the outer court. And Paul talked about the body and the spirit in his writing to the Romans. Romans 7:18 through 20. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwelleth no good thing, for to will is present with me, but how to perform that which is good I find not. For the good that I would, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do. He's basically, I know that's kind of confusing because of Old English. He's saying he does the good things he wants to do, he doesn't do. And the bad things he doesn't want to do, he ends up doing, and he's upset about that. But it says, now if I do that I would not, if I do something that I wouldn't do, it's no more I that do it, but the sin that dwells in me. All right, so then Romans 8:9 through 11 says, But ye are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if so be that the Spirit of God dwell in you. So you're in the Spirit. If the Spirit of God dwells in you, it's not that you're in the flesh, you're in the Spirit. Now, if any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he is none of his. So Spirit of God does not dwell in non-believers, or it's somebody who doesn't have that, who's living in the flesh. So if Christ be in you, the body is dead because of sin, so that's your physical body, but the Spirit is life because of righteousness. So the physical body takes on all of the consequences of sin, which is death. But if you have the Spirit of God, any righteousness, your spirit's made alive because of the righteousness. But if the Spirit of him that raised up Jesus from the dead dwell in you, he that raised up Christ from the dead shall also quicken your mortal bodies by his Spirit that dwelleth in you. Okay, so all of this can be used to show that the physical body is subject to sin, death, and decay, but the Spirit of God dwelling in our spirits triumphs over all that. There's something else too. Hebrews 4:14 through 16 says, For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. And again, we are certainly in a time of need right now. This passage is telling us how God can understand our weaknesses and temptations because he was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. I believe that it's possible this goes further than Jesus' earthly ministry. There's no doubt that Jesus, during his ministry, was tempted as we are and never sinned. The overall message here is that these temptations are not foreign to God. He experiences them himself, and given that, he understands what we are going through. But I believe, many times we might find ourselves considering this as like an antiquated message without realizing it. So, there's temptations and hardships we go through in our modern age on a daily basis that we might be tempted to think that God never had to deal with. For example, think about all the temptations that come from our modern technological devices that were not available in the time of Jesus, in the time that Jesus walked the earth. Jesus didn't have to worry about, having too much screen time, for example. Now, we might be tempted to think that way. We might even take that further and find ourselves believing that there are situations that we go through that bring about greater or situations that we go through that bring about great heartache, pain, and loss that Jesus himself might not have dealt with. We might be tempted to think that, but I believe that's impossible because I propose that God truly does understand, not only because he dealt with the same basic temptations during his earthly ministry, but because he dwells in us. I believe this means that he goes through all of our personal experiences with us. So it can't be that Jesus can't relate to, our temptations with like our phones or modern technology, because he's living in you and experiencing it with you right now. He understands in that way. He understands, and that's just as real as it gets. That's just as real as your own spirit. Going through it, living through it. When but this goes beyond our temptation and weakness. And here's the real hope message. It also deals with our hurt and our joy, our pain, our loss, our gain, our happiness, our tragedy. If God truly dwells in our spirit, and if our spirit is who we actually are as individuals, that's the real you, then God understands us in a way no one else can. He's the only one that can understand you that way. No one else can. When we go through experiences in life, he understands it because he's living it too, right there with you. He's the only one that can understand the subjective you. He's going through it too. He's living through all those experiences right there with you. So when we go through times of personal triumph, he celebrates with us. When we go through times of tragedy and loss, he cries with us. He experiences the same pain we feel because that's your spirit. Pain isn't just physical. Like when you have a deep emotional, just tragic pain, that's your spirit, and God dwells in your spirit. So the Spirit of God, he feels it too. He's experiencing that with you. So when you go through times of tragedy and loss, he cries with you. When we go through times of heartache and despair, he hurts with us. Not only does he do all of these things, but he also comforts us, he strengthens us, and he encourages us. So we're never really alone. And we have eternal life. In the last part of this, I kind of go through this eternal life thing and time, but I already kind of dealt with that here. But it's just the fact that we never truly die because the Spirit of God dwells in our spirit. Our physical body will die, but when that takes place, God brings us beyond the veil into eternity. And so, what exactly will that look like? We'll find out when we get there, and we're all getting there. None of us are getting out of this alive. But it's something we can look forward to. The end of physical life of our natural body is not truly the end if you're in Christ. It's merely the beginning of our life in eternity. So that's the message I think that we really need to get out there to people. That it is a relationship with Jesus, it is a relationship with God, but it's not just that. It's that now your Father, you're not alone anymore. Everybody who's outside of Christ, who doesn't know Christ, they're totally alone. They only have themselves. Even if they have friends and families and stuff, no one knows them like they do because they're their own individual. They have their own subjective experience and feelings, and no one can know that. No one can. Even if no one can know really how you feel about things. Even if I have similar feelings, I'm still me, you're still you, so no one can really know. I can't get inside your head, I can't look through your eyes. But God can and does. And he does it actively, like every day of your Christian walk with him. He experiences all of these things with you. So when things are going really good and there's cause for celebration and laughter and joy, he's there celebrating with you. At times of tragedy, if you have a child that dies or you get some really bad medical news or something like that, he's there hurting with you. He's experiencing that with you, so you don't have to be alone. He does that because he's a good father, just like you would with your own child. If you could. I mean, your child is still an individual, but when your child is going through something, you're there to care for him and see him through it. your Father, your Heavenly Father, is there for you too, but in a way that no one else can be, in a way where you are only alone in there, but not anymore. And he's there all the time to comfort you, and he goes through that pain with you because he wants to, because he wants you to know that you're not alone, and he wants to comfort you and help see you through it. And I wish that this was talked about more in church, because I really believe we as Christians would have a lot more peace if we knew that and lived our lives every day, and like knowing that actively. And we need to be reminded of it, because it's easy to forget. Because if you're anything like me, you're probably used to being alone. I mean, and I don't mean friends and family. I'm just talking about just in here, just your spirit. Before you were saved, you were all alone. And it's easy to get used to that. But it's also lonely, and it's depressing. And it takes some getting used to trust in that comfort that's there, that you're not alone anymore. That you're not experiencing this life alone anymore. It's not just you against the world. You have your Father right there with you. And it's hard to remember that. It's hard to. It takes practice. You have to purposefully live every life, every day, every moment, knowing that is the case. That God is right there, looking through your eyes, feeling your heart, experiencing your soul. His Spirit is right there. And the cool thing about that is you start to experience His Spirit too. It's not just a one-way street, it's a relationship. So you start to experience it the way that, experience life the way that God sees it. There's a level of this that's taught in church that kind of goes something like, once you read more of the Bible and you learn more about Jesus, you start not liking the stuff that He doesn't like anymore, and it's because you're learning more about Him. And it's true, but it's so much deeper than that. It's so much deeper than just that. I mean, you genuinely get a distaste for things that He doesn't like, and it's not because He doesn't like them. It's because you're feeling what He's feeling, because His Spirit dwells in your spirit, and it's a two-way street. It goes both ways. It's a two-way street. So you start feeling that, just the same way that he's feeling what you're going through. So no matter what you're going through, and that's why Jesus was tempted in every way that we are, or we ever could be. It's not. I don't believe it's only because of His earthly ministry. It is that, but it's also because He's feeling it with you when you're tempted, when you go through heartache, when you have the best day of your life or the worst day of your life. He feels that. And if we start just living moment by moment, if we just start living as if we know that, start living life as if that's the case, because it is, there's so much peace that comes from that. I can understand now why the first century church was so different from what our church is today. And I think it's because of that. Because when the Holy Spirit came down at Pentecost, humanity has never known anything like that before. Not since Adam lost it in the garden. Humanity has never known anything like that before. And having that direct one-to-one, intimate relationship with the Creator of the universe, with your Father who created you and everybody else, nothing can get in between that. Nothing can separate that. That is the most powerful thing there is, in terms of relationships. So the first part is realizing that we have that as individuals, but that as a group, as Christians, that's what binds us together. Because you have that, but I have that too. So we have that in common. We both go through life sort of as like a shared experience with God living in us. And that's what we all have in common. That's why we're brothers and sisters, because our Father is with us all the time, in us, in our spirit, living life with us. No matter what is going on, what's happening, he doesn't leave us. You know, we're familiar with these Bible verses that talks about how he'll never leave us and forsake us, but I think sometimes we lose the meaning of that, of really how deep and real and powerful that is. It's not just that he's sitting on the throne in heaven and he's just watching what's going on. That's distant, you know. But he's actually dwelling in your spirit at all times. Literally nothing could ever be closer to you than that. So why does God feel distant at times? It's because we're not taught this in church. We're not taught what the actual relationship between us and God really is, how it works, how it operates. How, you know, we're sort of made to believe that he's just kind of this distant creator that doesn't interact. But all he does is interact. But he does it. He interacts with his children. He's a good father to his children, and that's kind of the message of hope that I want to, you know, I want to get across, and I want to motivate you, and I want to inspire you to start thinking about that every day. Pray about it. You know, ask God to make that more real to you. You know, to really make that real, because it is real. But we've lived in a world our whole lives that's constantly telling us that type of thing doesn't happen. And we've even been hearing that from other Christians, that type of thing doesn't happen, that's not what a relationship with God is like. It's just a belief and nothing more. It's just a belief. Even if it's real, it's still just a belief. It's so much more than that. And the church just misses out on it because the so-called leadership doesn't tell them, because they themselves don't know. So I'm hoping that inspires you, and you know, I could talk about that all day. I could talk about that all night. But I hope that's encouraging, and I certainly hope that helps. And well, if people want, let's do one more quick Q&A, and then we'll call it a night. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat now, and we'll talk about it. But I do think that pretty much is just about the best note we could end on, because that's really powerful. And I mean, the Bible has been saying this all along. It's just we haven't been taught to read it that way. We haven't been taught to learn about Jesus in that way, or, you know, get to know him in that way. And we would get along, we all would get along a lot better, and we would have a lot more peace, and we would be able to really be that light to the world if we started operating in that more. Okay, does anybody have any questions? I'm just going to give it another few seconds, and if not, that's totally fine, because we can definitely call it good tonight. I am exhausted. I gotta work tomorrow. I'm working from home because I'm quarantined, but I've been working from home lately anyway, so it's totally fine. So, Josh, any suggestions for quitting drinking for good? That is a very good question. I dealt with this too. I used to be a just raging alcoholic, and it's hard. It's really hard. There were a lot of times that I tried to quit, and I would always go back to it, and it was because I actually believed I couldn't live without it. I believed that I was so screwed up and so messed up that I couldn't handle life without something to look forward to, without a weekend drink, which became a daily drink. I was drinking every day for a long time. And he's asking if we'll pray for him. Absolutely, we'll pray for you. But I dealt with this too, and it's certainly not easy. I don't want to diminish that. But there's no one solution that's going to work for everybody, except to just generally say Jesus. But you know, you already know that, and I that's just patronizing to put it like that, because obviously with alcoholism, it's a serious thing, and you if you're anything like me, you probably hate that you do it. I did. I hated that I did it, and then when I would do it, and then I would hate myself for it, which would make me drink more. And then it was just this cycle. It just, I really thought alcoholism was going to kill me because I didn't see any way out of it. There wasn't really a thing that like worked for me. I think there was a time. So with me personally, I've had all sorts of addictions, and it seems like with me, God has always dealt with the most severe ones first. So, the things that would like kill me today rather than a week from now. So there was a time instead of there being like a thing. So there were times that I tried to quit, and I would go back to it. Quitting takes practice. So here's what I would say. If you have tried to quit and you keep going back to it, don't count that as a loss. Count that as practice. You're practicing. You're practicing a new skill. You're practicing sobriety, and it's hard, and it does take practice. It takes time to get better at it. So if you quit for a week or if you quit for a month and then you go back to it, don't beat yourself up too much about that. Just it's practice. It means, okay, I need more practice. That's what it means. So don't count it as a loss necessarily. You can also think of it as every time you do it, you're closer to that time where it's finally going to be done. Think about like knocking over a vending machine. You can't just push over a vending machine. You got to rock it back and forth a few times before it finally knocks over. Learned that from Seinfeld. But it's kind of like that. It takes a few times for it to finally knock over. But if you stick with it, and I don't mean stick with it meaning like if you just don't drink, because you might be the kind of person that can just stop drinking. There are people that are able to do that, or God works with them in a way that just the type of person they are, that's the best solution for them. But for me, the best solution was the practice thing. The only way that it was going to work for me is if I had to do it a few times. And every time that you go back to it, you learn more about yourself. What was it that triggered it this time? How do I think about that next time? So it's practice. But when the time finally does come, when when it's the last time, I guess I can't speak for everybody, so I don't want to promise that this is going to happen for you. But for me, I knew it. It wasn't that I wanted it to be. It was like I knew I had enough. I had enough practice. It's done, and I can be confident in knowing that it's done now. Now, I'm not a fortune teller. I can't say that there's no set of circumstances that could ever come up in my life that would draw me back into it. I don't foresee that happening, but I can't say that would be impossible. I'm still human. I'm still flawed. That's always a possibility. But it's sort of like when you learn a new skill, there comes a time where you know it well enough where you don't have to think about it so much and you can just do it. Like, I don't know if you've ever tried to learn a musical instrument, but like that's like that. So for a long time, for like the past year and a half, I've been trying to learn drums, and I'm not great at it or anything, but it was I had to like consciously think about what my feet were doing and my hands were doing, and it was really difficult, but I really liked the instrument and I wanted to learn. But there came a time where I could start to do just simple beats without thinking about it, and I could just start to kind of have fun with it. It's sort of like that. You get practice in, and you after a while you'll build up so much practice that you don't really have to think about not drinking. Like you'll just kind of do it. It's almost like muscle memory, but it's not muscles exactly. It's more of like a spiritual or emotional kind of memory, but you'll get to the point where you'll go longer stretches until it's done. And when it's done, it's like when you learn how to play a couple chords and strum on the guitar without thinking about it, or when you learn to play a couple simple beats on drum. Did I say strum guitar? Or did I say drums? I'm using both as an example, and I think I'm getting them mixed up. But it's just when you can do that stuff and not really think about it, and then start to enjoy it because you're not consciously thinking about it every second. You can just kind of play the guitar, or you can play a beat, and you just get into it. Sobriety is like that. So that's what it was for me anyway. I can't speak for everybody, and I don't know if it's the same for you. But that would be my best, any advice that I could offer on quitting drinking. That's how it happened for me. So I don't know if anything in there was useful, but if it was, I'm happy to share that with you. And by the way, anytime you have a question, you can get a hold of me through the website or email me or whatever, and I'm happy to, and we'll all keep you in prayer for sure about that, because it's certainly not easy. But I'm really happy to hear that you're trying, and that's great. I mean, even to even ask the question publicly like that, I think shows a lot of strength, and I think that shows that you're the kind of person that you absolutely can see this through. You might hit some bumps along the road, but I believe you can do it. All right. So, Karen's got a question. Have you seen Bill Gates' video, Event 201? And if so, what do you think about that? Yeah, I talked about it a little bit before in this video. Again, I get more into it in the multiverse episode of Into the Multiverse that's going to air in like a 2.5 weeks, something like that. But basically, I would say best advice, pray for Bill Gates. Man, I got reamed out on Facebook for daring to suggest that we should pray for such an evil man. I actually had people saying he's too far gone. He's sold out to the enemy. He's alive, isn't he? He's breathing. No, he's not. He's not. I don't care if he's the most evil man in the world. I don't care. He is alive. He is breathing. There is still hope. That does not excuse us to not pray for the guy. That gives us more reason to pray for him. That gives us more reason to fast. Deny ourselves food to show how serious we are about wanting this guy's salvation. We need to pray that God gives him every chance imaginable. I mean, and think about it. Do you really think when Paul was persecuting Christians, killing Christians, do you think in that first century church that Christians were not praying for him? Jesus literally showed up to Paul when he was Saul and got him converted that way. There is no reason that same thing can't happen today. The first century church knew a lot more and practiced a lot more about prayer than we do. And I believe that it was because Christians were praying for him, having love for him, for Saul, even though he was killing everybody, still had enough love that while they were praying for protection from him, they were praying for his soul. And look what Jesus did with that. I mean, could you honestly say that you believe that Christians in the first century were not praying for him? They were certainly praying for him, and they were praying a lot harder than we tend to pray for people today. So the best advice I can give about the Bill Gates stuff is don't fear him, but pray for him. Now, definitely keep your eye on him, and I'm glad that you asked the question. I'm really glad that you did, because it's a good question. We do need to keep our eye on him because we need to know what's going on, and he's up to some pretty nefarious stuff. But that does not get us out of praying for him, and we shouldn't just pray for him out of obligation either. We need to get to a place where we can actually have real love, like what I was talking about before, that inner relationship with Jesus that you have. Just think, Bill Gates could have that. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't that be amazing? And what an amazingly powerful warrior for Christ he could be if he accepted Christ as his Savior. With all of his connections and resources, can you imagine what God could do with him? It'd be amazing. So we need to pray for him. It is not too late. He is not too far gone. Anyone that says so is absolutely wrong. Wolf King is saying, I'm off to bed. Good night, Josh, and God bless. Good night, everybody. Good night. Thank you again for the question. I missed your comment up here. You're saying thank you for taking time out for me. It means a lot. It's my pleasure. If my experiences and if me being open and my past sins can help someone else out, then I am happy to do it. So yeah, anytime, man, anytime. I hope you do well. Keep in touch and let us know how it goes. All right, let's see. Just seeing if there's any other questions. Yeah, it looks like quite a few people are going to bed. Wow, we've been going on 2.5 hours. Yeah, we should probably call this a night. All right, everybody. Well, this has been a blast. Give me some feedback too. You don't have to do it in the chat right now or anything, but you can send me some through the website or through the email or in the comment section if you're on YouTube would be great. Let me know how this live stream worked for you, what you think about it, and if this is something we should do every day. Now, I'm not going to be doing like 2.5 hours every day for sure, but I enjoy this. I enjoy spending time with you guys. I would like to do this more, and if you enjoy it as well, then we'll see what we can do about keeping it going. Can't promise every day, but we can keep it going. So leave me a comment, send me an email. Facebook comment would be great too if you're viewing this on Facebook. And also let me know how the live stream was, just the viewing quality of it. Looks like we didn't get any viewers on DLive or Twitch. Surprise, surprise, I just started those accounts today. But let me know how the actual viewing experience was. Was the video good quality? Was the sound okay? Was it buffering a lot? That kind of stuff. I'd love some feedback. All right, everybody. I need to learn how to stop the stream. I don't know how to stop the stream on this thing. Maybe it's over here. Now you're just getting me rambling and stuff. Oh no, it's here. Okay, I see where it is. All right, everybody, we are going to call it good. If you haven't had a chance to already, consider going to dailyrenegade.com, and becoming a member. This kind of stuff that you got tonight, it's just a glimpse of the kind of stuff that we're all about at Daily Renegade. We're all about fellowship and love but good solid theology too, and just trying to find out what is going on in the world today, what's the real story behind the story. So make sure that you check that out, dailyrenegade.com. All right, everybody, again, thank you so much for joining me. It has been an absolute blessing for me to spend this time with you, and it's just been great. Thank you for those who have joined in the chat. It's been fantastic. Wouldn't be the same if there wasn't a way for us to communicate with one another. So this is really good. God bless all of you. Till next time, love you all. Take care and God bless.